pretty wild to be sitting here. 2 years ago, I was thinking about killing myself, and now I'm sitting across from a pastor.
2 years ago.
2 years ago.
So crazy, Matt. As you know, it's a big epidemic in our city and in our region. This drug epidemic is taking so many people we know. We both know a lot of people, have done a lot of funerals since being here. And I'm sure you met a lot of people in that same boat. And so I just want to have a conversation about it, you know what I mean? For someone that's been there and you've seen the other side. And so we're hoping that this can kind of shed light on some things and help some people along the way. So let me ask you this, right? So as you said 2 years ago, you were almost on the brink of suicide.
Right.
When did it all start for you? Like, when did that whole lifestyle got a hold of you? Like, take us back there, you know?
All right. Well, even before drugs and alcohol, I always felt like some sort of disconnection from like a lot of people and emotional like detachment. And probably like 12, 13 years old, I had my first drink. And I don't know, I felt it was soothing to have that drink, you know, and I felt like some sort of connection to something. I felt at ease, and felt like I could be myself around my friends now. And it took off very quickly. I eventually started smoking weed, like within the same year. I remember I was in the 6th grade smoking weed and drinking, like it was no big deal. I look at that now, it's just crazy. And you know, it progressed. By the time I graduated high school, I was already doing ecstasy and amphetamines and things like that. And I was a full-blown addict and alcoholic by the time I graduated high school.
Wow.
Like, I remember my senior year, I was like 30 pounds underweight and just off and running.
What do you think drove you there, man?
I had like a lot of fear and anxiety, and I was seeking something else outside of me. You know, I was seeking like I couldn't feel a connection to somebody or another person without being under the influence of something. I always felt like a disconnect. I really can't explain it without I don't know, but the more I did it, the more I needed. And every substance that I used, it eventually stopped working, and I had to move on to something stronger or a combination of something to fulfill that like longing inside.
And you said by high school you were already...
I was already hooked on like hard drugs by the time I graduated high school. You know, I would go through periods where I would sober up for a little bit. I would start exercising. I would find the right girlfriend. I always thought something outside of me was gonna repair me, like whether it was substances, a girlfriend, a certain amount of money, the right job, and it all fell short eventually. It was like very fleeting, like fulfillment. By the time I was 23, 24, I had moved on to opiates. At that time, it was mostly Percocets, and I ended up getting a DUI right here in New Bedford too before I even lived here. And at that time, I was extremely hopeless. I was extremely depressed. So that DUI kind of sent me over the edge. I spent the night in jail, and then the next night I wrote a bunch of goodbye letters, and I downed a bottle of sleeping pills, thinking I would never wake up again.
This was when you were 23, you said?
23, 24, 23? Yeah. I thought that my life had been written, that was the end of it.
So you had more than one
yeah.
thought of suicide through this process?
I was hopeless at a very, probably before I even graduated high school.
Wow.
I didn't realize how sick it was until, you know, the last few years. I always put like an expiration date on my life, like I'm not gonna live past 25, or I'm not gonna, I sure as heck didn't think I was gonna reach 30. But I ended up waking up and spending like 3 days in the ICU, and then that kind of started off a chain of being in and out of psychiatric hospitals and detoxes and more substances, and it didn't get any better.
So from the period of like 23, 24, what other things did you end up getting into? Like what other drugs and...
Well, 23, 24 was more Oxycontin and Percocets and things like that. And I remember I went to a doctor. I said, I'm having some withdrawal problems, and he prescribed me something else that was addictive. So now I'm drinking, doing oxys, and now I'm on Klonopin too. So now I have like this. I'm just walking around high all the time.
Yeah.
I eventually did sober up for about a year after that suicide attempt. It was actually a pretty painful year in my life because I had no idea how to live without substances. And I eventually, the pain got too great. I ended up having a drink, and it just spiraled out of control very shortly. After that, I was probably in a hospital within a few months after having just one drink. You know, it spiraled back out of control.
And that was about a year after you were sober for a little bit?
Yep. And then, you know, I tried sports. You know, I tried to get clean through sports and martial arts, and that worked for a little bit. And I ended up blowing out my knee after a year of training. And in my first tournament, and I got put back on narcotics for about 6 months. And that's when other things started coming into play. I started getting into Suboxone, started treating my drug addiction with more drugs. I was just getting them from a doctor now. And that really wasn't much of a lifestyle either.
Yeah.
You know, I always felt like an empty shell of myself. I very rarely had a sober breath, whether I was on Suboxone or drinking or something. And then eventually I did move on to heroin and crack cocaine for a little while. And man, within like 2 weeks, everything that I owned was sold or pawned. Stuff that I didn't own was sold and pawned too.
Wow.
I turned into a thief, a liar. You know. If you crossed my path, it was a good chance you were getting hurt, emotionally, physically. It was a destructive life.